But what happens when the scars are invisible? There's a silent epidemic happening in relationships right now where the damage isn't physical, it's psychological. You might feel like you are constantly walking on the eggshells, or that you are slowly losing your mind because your reality is constantly being denied. Abuse is not a communication issue. If you feel smaller, confused, or fearful in your relationship, you aren't dealing with a difficult partner. Power and control dynamics are the core of all abusive relationships. Not some, not a little, all abusive relationships. Mental and emotional abuse is not an accident. It is rooted in one person asserting dominance and limiting the other person's autonomy. So it's like I try to make you feel like you can't do it without me, or everything you've accomplished is because of me.
Hey guys, I'm back with another episode of Mental Wealth. This podcast is used to express thoughts, experiences, and lessons. I aim to be as transparent as possible. If you enjoy an episode, please don't forget to like, comment, and tell a friend. Thank you.
Hey guys, welcome back. I think I should start this episode with a little bit of a life update. Sorry about not being able to put out his videos weekly like I used to be able to. Life has been lifing lately. But more recently, I'm trying to work on topics that I'm seeing at work and more so seeing around me. That's what I felt like I was trying to do earlier, but there's just a better way to do it. Probably majority of my episodes after this, they will all be focused on something either I'm seeing around me, seeing online, because I do this to impact people. So I don't want to be talking about things that people are not actually struggling with. But today's episode, I plan to talk about emotional abuse. Emotional abuse is a lot of things that people have common misconceptions about, like constantly tracking somebody's location and stalking them, ghosting people, even gaslighting. So in today's episode, I plan to break down what is emotional abuse, talk about some things that people can do to help them when dealing with it, and ways to spot emotional abuse. Before I dive into today's episode, I have to give a disclaimer, because you guys aren't about to sue me. I don't know. I worked hard to get to where I'm at, so you guys not about to sue me because of something I said online. Anyways, before we dive into today's episode, I want to remind you, while I am a licensed therapist, this podcast is designed for educational and informational purposes only. The strategies and tools that we discuss here at Mental Health are meant to help you invest in your own inner economy, but they do not constitute professional medical advice or diagnosis. Listening to this episode does not establish a therapist-client relationship. If you have specific mental health needs, please consult with a professional in your area. And as always, if you or someone you know is in crisis, please call 988 or visit your nearest emergency room. Now let's get back to the topic. When we hear the word abuse, we almost always look for a bruise. We look for a raised voice, a broken plate, maybe even a hole in the wall. But what happens when the scars are invisible? There's a silent epidemic happening in relationships right now where the damage isn't physical, it's psychological. You might feel like you are constantly walking on the eggshells, or that you are slowly losing your mind because your reality is constantly being denied. You might tell yourself, they just have anger issues. That's just how they are. Or we just have bad communication. But I want you to listen closely. Abuse is not a communication issue. If you feel smaller, confused, or fearful in your relationship, you aren't dealing with a difficult partner. You're dealing with a systematic design. So it isn't really more so that they care that much about you, is a different way of control. You have power dynamics. To truly understand this, we have to burn down an old definition. We often think abuse is driven by an inability to control emotions like anger, or an inability to express needs. But the clinical reality is much colder. Power and control dynamics are the core of all abusive relationships. Not some, not a little, all abusive relationships. Mental and emotional abuse is not an accident. It is rooted in one person asserting dominance and limiting the other person's autonomy. It is a strategic effort to create an environment where the victim becomes increasingly dependent and confused or fearful. This isn't about two people failing to hear each other. It's about ideological entitlement. The belief that one partner has the right to control the victim's behavior, dictate their reality, and frame their own needs as superior. When we stop looking at this as a bad relationship and start seeing it as a power struggle, the fog begins to lift. So abuse. Abuse is actually rooted in one person asserting dominance, lifting autonomy, and creating an environment where the victim becomes dependent, confused, or fearful. So it's like I try to make you feel like you can't do it without me, or everything you've accomplished is because of me. When in reality, you could have accomplished it without me, without my help. You didn't really need me to do it. But you don't know that. So let's talk about 8 tactics to recognize. Because there's a lot, and I'm probably not covering all of it, so I'm just going to cover briefly what I've seen the most. So number 1, coercion and manipulation. What is it? Pressuring behavior through threats or subtle psychological pressure. It looks like conditional affection. Sort of like, if you want me to stay, you'll do, or just turning normal boundaries into punishments. So you might see it like, what is a common way that people would? If you want me to stay with you, you'll lose weight. That's a lot. It makes somebody second guess who they are, their reality, everything they like to do. The impact of coercion and manipulation. The victim complies out of fear rather than autonomy. So I listen to you, not because I came to my own agreement about listening to you. It's because I don't want you to leave. Or I don't want to deal with whatever punishment that you have in store for me. So punishments can look completely different ways. Punishments can look like a lot of things. A punishment could be one thing to me and a completely different to you. But they tend to punish people where they know will affect them the most. So either you can kick somebody out the health insurance or whatever. Let's talk about number 2, gaslighting. So what is gaslighting? Because I think the big problem with gaslighting is there's so many definitions of gaslighting. So I think what is very important for me when I talk about these 8 different things to recognize, I'm going to define each by the definition that is more appropriate than what you would see on. Because a big problem that happens in today's world is people use a lot of words that they don't actually know what it means. I could even go into the history of gaslighting, but I'm not going to sit here and do all that. But this is what I'm going to say it is, and what I'm going to define it as. Gaslighting is a deliberate pattern intended to make the victim question their memory, perception, or judgment. It requires an intent to destabilize a pattern behavior over time, and control is the end goal. So what's a good example of gaslighting? A really good example of gaslighting is, imagine you confront your partner about something hurtful they said the night before. So you say, I was really hurt when you called me stupid at dinner last night. The gaslighter would say, I never said. You're imagining things again. Why are you always making up problems that don't exist? So now it makes the victim question everything. Like, should I have even said something to him? Maybe I might be tripping. Or am I sure that I understand what happened correctly? It impacts everything. The problem with gaslighting is it's a denial of reality. So it kind of goes back into the 3 truths thing that I always talk about. There's 3 truths, 3 common truths. There's a truth you believe, there's a truth I believe, and there's the actual truth. The problem with society is the actual truth is the only truth out of all 3 that does not matter. Because even though it's not true, if you believe it to be true, it changes your perception, reality, and how you experience the situation. And the big thing is, with gaslighting, they try to make the victim the unstable one. Not the person who's doing it, but they make the victim look like the one that's unstable. And we have number 3, emotional withholding. So this is like not texting somebody back, ghosting them. So what is emotional withholding? Controlling emotional access to punish or regulate the victim. An example, the silent treatment. Or only providing positive reinforcement when the victim does what you want them to do. The impact, the victim develops hypervigilance and people pleasing. So a lot of the people pleasing behaviors that I tend to see usually comes from past experiences with being emotionally abused. And I'll just go on record to say that probably everybody who will watch this video has been in some form of one of these 8 different tactics. And they've experienced some form of emotional abuse. But a lot of the people-pleasing behaviors that I see, especially with kids, come from them being abused, and they don't even realize it. And a lot of times, the victim doesn't even realize that they're a victim. Number 4, isolation. So what is isolation? It's a systematic effort to cut somebody off from supportive relationships that could increase independence. The tactic subtly undermine the trust in friends and family, or even the therapist. So I think a big thing that we're seeing now is, what is it? The Young Thug thing. So Young Thug gets out of jail, he's doing all these interviews, and Young Thug says, I don't want my girlfriend to see a therapist because it makes me feel like I'm not doing my job as a man. So talking to enough men, there are some men that agree with it. The problem with that situation is, what gives you the right to solve all of their problems? What gives you the right to control how they feel because you don't feel like you're a man if they can't get better from your advice, or they can only listen to your advice to get better? Even just listening to men talk about like why couples therapy is bad. Majority of the people that I hear say couples therapy is bad are people that never tried it. I tried it. It was amazing. It helped me see things from various perspectives that I would have never saw it from. And it's literally my job. So, I don't know. I kind of say it's like a mind virus, like going around, because it's very impractical for you to have to solve all your problems and solve all somebody else's, and for you to know exactly what to tell somebody. And it's very controlling. And I think that's the underlying issue with saying that when people say things like that, I wouldn't let my girl go see a therapist, or because it starts with little things and then they escalate. So what you tend to see with isolating people is they make people feel like they accomplish those things because of them. Or you see that they slowly ruin the relationships that they have with their family. All right, so number 5, I'll talk about surveillance. So what is surveillance? Stalking, or constantly scrolling on somebody's Instagram, or constantly checking their phone to see if they're talking to somebody else or anything. This is an invasion of privacy first. Forget all the abuse and everything that goes along with it. This is an invasion of privacy. Everybody has the right to privacy. I mean, we live in America. Some people that watch this might not live in America, but everybody should have some kind of privacy. But the problem with the surveillance situation is that it doesn't naturally come off as straight up abuse. A lot of these things you might, when you sit down and think about it, you're like, dang, I didn't see it as abuse when it was happening, but it was. Like even me, like I remember having a girlfriend in high school and she constantly wanted to check my Instagram and check my Snapchat. And then she wanted to cut me off from my friends. I'm like, man, if you don't go on somewhere. But surveillance is the issue because it's a form of control. Initially, it can come off as somebody being very concerned and everything. And I think a lot of people try to hide behind being actually concerned. There's a difference between being concerned and control. And they're actually controlling you, but they're trying to hide behind it being concerning. And this is one I see a lot. I see a lot with people around me when they're talking about some, bro, I went to sleep and my girl went through my phone again. It's the 3rd time she went through my... I'm going to just go ahead and give you some advice. If your partner going through your phone, it's because they're cheating. Not majority of the time when people search people's phones, it's because they feel guilt. So the only way they don't... Usually, a way people don't feel as guilty is if the other person did something wrong too. So they check the phone to find if, hey, you did something wrong. So don't check phones. That's just my advice on that situation. I've never checked the phone. I don't see it as something a man should be doing anyway, honestly. I mean, I'm not big on gender roles. I kind of do believe in gender roles a little bit. But as a man, a grown man, you sitting around scrolling through a woman's phone, going through her group chats, invading her privacy, reading messages between her mom, all kinds of stuff. Even for the women, there are a lot of women constantly going through people's phones too. It's not just the man, but just leave the person. If you have to search their phone, leave. You're better off just leaving because you already did something anyway. Let's talk about financial control. Number 6, getting somebody fired. Getting somebody fired. Or that's a big thing. So you go up to somebody's job and you cuss them out in front of the job and do everything to sabotage their employment. Or some people might sabotage your education. People would go up to the school and know you're in class or whatever and try to sabotage that, write nasty emails or whatever. But the problem with financial control is it's restricting your ability to access or even earn resources. So I can't even get an education or I can't even get employment. Like I just can't get anything without having to go through you first. The problem with this is that it happens a lot more than what people think. And that's just one form of financial control. There are some people that have couples that have joint accounts and they can't even spend $10 without having to ask their partner first. That's very stressful and that's very time consuming. I can't get a candy bar or buy some soap without having to check in. You can't get anything done. The person that's controlling you, they constantly have to be monitoring to see if you're checking in with them, and then you can't get anything done because you can't move free. Money kind of rules the world. I mean, I hate to say it, like, or information. You have to have something. But if I have to go through somebody to get everything done, I'm just gonna quit trying to get stuff done, and that's what happens. Number 7, degradation. So what is degradation? It's efforts to erode the victim's identity. So they frame the criticism as the truth, or I'm just trying to help you. But what it actually does is it makes you question your reality. It makes you question who you are. And if you don't know who you are, you can be told who you are. So that's the big role in that. And number 8, we have dominance and entitlement. So what is this? This is the belief that the abuser is entitled to control the victim. Usually when people go through these things, you might see the mindset of they justify a lot of harmful things and make it their fault. I messed up. This is why they're treating me like that. Or they didn't do something right. In reality, they're just being abused. They don't even realize that they're being completely manipulated. And they just don't realize to the extent. A common example of this is the wife beater concept. Now, growing up, I always wondered why they called a white tank top a wife beater. I don't know, what was it, like the 60s or 70s? Anyways, whenever the guys would come home, the wife didn't cook or have the house together to what they wanted, they come home and beat the hell out of their partner. They literally named the shirt that they would wear a wife beater. That's one thing. But an example is, imagine a situation where a partner explodes in anger or verbally attacks you because an expectation wasn't met. Like dinner wasn't ready on time. So the abuser would just yell, name call you, maybe even give you silent treatment, or physically assault you. It's entitlement because instead of apologizing for the outburst, they justify it. They justify it by claiming it was your responsibility to prevent them from getting angry. They might say, I wouldn't have had to yell if you just did your job. The problem? The abuser operates on a belief that their feelings and needs are more important than yours. Why is entitlement? Because it's compliance without question. They expect you to comply with their rules or schedule without even question. I can't ask a question. I can't ask a question. I see it a lot with my kids. There are some kids that are like, I can't ask my parents questions. This raises all kinds of red flags in my head. Ding, 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 ding. My next question usually is, why can't you ask them questions? Well, what is their response when you ask them questions? Because usually when you can't ask somebody questions, it is a form of control. Now let's talk about the psychology of step, because this has been very big when I see these situations. The first thing people always ask is, why didn't they just leave? There's a lot of things that take place that make it hard for them to just leave. Especially like a lot of times it's financial abuse. I can't pay my bills. I need health insurance. I don't know anything without them. There's a lot. It's access to their information, access to money, or access to resources. Well, let's talk about cognitive dissonance. So what is cognitive dissonance? I'm probably saying it wrong. There's a guy at church. I'm going to say it like that. I'm probably saying it wrong. Sorry, guys. It's an internal tension that arises when a person holds contradictory ideas simultaneously. In the context of an abusive relationship, common examples include believing, I know this is harmful, but I love them. Or they hurt me, but they didn't mean. The resolution to this, to reduce this painful distress, the brain instinctively tries to resolve the contradiction. People often do this by changing their beliefs, rationalizing the behavior, or minimizing the harm. The clinical outcome of this is, this helps explain why victims make excuses for their partners, minimize their abuse, or feel paralyzed by ambivalence when trying to leave the relationship. Then we can talk about trauma theory and survival responses. So the definition, most people know fight or flight, but fawning is an automatic physiological response designed to protect someone from the threat. Fawning is essentially people pleasing as a shield. It drives appeasing behavior to keep you safe. It is your nervous system deciding, if I can make you happy or be useful enough, you won't hurt me today. What it looks like, over apologizing to lower the tension. Constantly scanning your partner's mood to determine your own behavior. So if they're upset or if they're angry, I want to act one way to not make them angry. Or abandoning your own boundaries to avoid conflict. Key takeaway of this, if you find yourself being nice to someone who is hurting you, it doesn't mean you're weak. It means your body has identified a threat and is using a high level biological strategy to survive it. And a lot of co-occurring stuff I see with kids, probably in adults too, but mainly, since I mainly work with kids, is like when kids are dealing with abuse, I usually see people pleasing, and I usually see a lack of self-esteem, confidence, and of course, I can't ask questions. I can't ask my parents questions. We can talk about the nervous system, dysregulation. Trauma shifts people outside their regulated zone, leading to numbness, panic, or shutdown. And we can talk about briefly attachment theory. Attachment injuries explain why clients feel deeply connected to an abusive partner or struggle with separation despite the pain. I think this also leads me into trauma bonds, because we see that. You may see it a lot more than I see. But trauma bonds, why do we stay? One of the most painful questions victims ask themselves is, why can't I just leave? Or why do I miss them even though they are terrible to me? The answer isn't that you're weak. The answer is trauma bonding. The definition: attachment through injury. A trauma bond occurs when a deep connection is formed, not through consistent safety, but through attachment injuries. Breaks in safety and responsiveness. You aren't just bonded by love. You're bonded by the intense emotional survival of navigating a threat together. How's the bond? So how does this bond actually form? Emotional withholding. It's one of the things we talked about earlier. But this is, again, where the abuser controls your access to connection. Crucially, they only provide positive reinforcement when you do what they say. This unpredictably keeps you addicted to chasing the wind of their affection. Brain fog, which is cognitive dissonance. You're stuck holding two opposing beliefs at once. I know this is harmful, but I love him. I love him so much. To survive this mental stress, your brain tries to resolve the conflict by minimizing the harm or rationalizing their behavior. They didn't mean to hurt me. In the nervous system, you aren't just emotionally up and down. Your biology is shifting outside its regulated zone into hyperarousal, which is really panic, or shutdown. You eventually rely on the abuser to regulate you back to calm down. The takeaway: if you're stuck in this cycle, understand that homeostasis is working against you. Relationships tend to maintain patterns, even unhealthy ones, to keep familiarity. Breaking a trauma bond feels like going through withdrawal because your body has adapted to the chaos. Recognizing that this is psychological addiction, not just a relationship problem, is your first step to freedom. And I think a great follow-up episode to this topic is, what is a relationship problem? Because people are thinking things are relationship problems, and it's actually abuse and control. I'm like, that's not a problem. That's like, they're the problem. It's not a normal like growing pain or something. So I might look into that. But we can talk about ACEs and family systems. So ACEs is adverse child experiences. Homeostasis is relationships maintain patterns, even unhealthy ones, to keep familiarity, which is why leaving feels destabilizing. Also, with this episode, I'm probably going to attach like a ACEs questionnaire because it might be helpful. I participated in the questionnaire, and upon completing, I was like, oh my God, my scores are extremely. But I think it's very important for people to do things like that. Even when like the family systems problem. There's a lot of family issues that my family has, other people's family has, that they just don't talk about it. We don't talk about the uncle that used to abuse their children and all the other stuff. We just don't talk about it. Or we don't talk about the intergenerational trauma that gets passed down, or the various abuses that happen in families. It just don't get talked about. And a lot of times it's just to keep the status quo, or we don't want your business getting out. So I'm going through it losing my mind, but you're more so worried about how it makes the family look versus what your child is going through. So it's a lot of times why you see it. I still remember the movie Precious. Oh my gosh. It makes me think about Precious a lot. But Precious was being abused by her mom and her dad. And she just couldn't do anything. She couldn't do anything. And sometimes people are so used to inconsistency that consistency becomes their problem. All right, enough of talking about all of that. Now we're going to talk about how we get past all this. I just had to give you guys enough background information on the topic. Now we can talk about how to get past it. So how do we break the cycle from recognition to action? The reality check. You can't communicate your way out of control. Once you recognize these tactics, gaslighting, isolation, coercion, the most common instinct is to try and explain your feelings better. But the way abuse works is it's rooting in asserting dominance and limiting your autonomy. So the best thing to do is to stop debating in there, which they will deny. They're going to deny it. So there's no point in asking them about it anyway. They're just going to say no, and that's going to make you angry. So I wouldn't debate the narrative. I would start observing the pattern. You cannot fix the relationship by explaining your pain to somebody whose goal is to control. It's even similar to when people are looking for offense in everything you say. So it doesn't matter how you say it, what you say, that's the only thing they're looking for. We can confront the cognitive dissonance, and that's when you hold two conflicting beliefs at the same time. So they hurt me, but they love me. The fix: to resolve the tension by rationalizing or minimizing the harm. Instead of making excuses for the behavior to feel better, practice holding the uncomfortable truth. I love them and they are hurting me. Acknowledging abuse without minimizing it is the first step to regaining your reality. A lot of people are in denial. People lie to themselves. Lie to themselves so much they believe it. That's why I briefly touched on the 3 truths. Doesn't matter that it's not the truth. If you believe it to be true, that's your truth. And there is your truth and there is the truth. Another thing we can do is shake up the homeostasis. We got to shake something around. We can't keep the family going how it's going. Something got to. But relationships try to maintain homeostasis. Well, they want to stay the same, even if being the same isn't healthy. Fix for this? Just prepare yourself. You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. When you start setting boundaries or reclaiming your independence, it will feel like destabilizing. We're wrong. The system will fight back to get you to return to your role. Expecting the discomfort prevents you from interpreting as a sign that you're making a mistake. Because you will be told no. You will be told, are you tripping? Or vice versa, or anything. But you will have to push back on it. And the more comfortable that you can get being uncomfortable will allow you to push forward and get through. Additionally, another great step is stabilization. You probably would want to start with prioritizing stabilization and your emotional regulation skills before trying to do deep trauma processing. Because if you do it the other way around, you're probably going to be left somewhere not feeling good. The fix: you don't need to solve the whole relationship today. You don't. Your immediate job is to get your nervous system back inside its tolerance, the window of tolerance. This might mean small acts of autonomy, reconnecting with a friend to break isolation, opening a separate bank account to counter financial control, or simply taking 10 minutes of privacy to undo the pressure of somebody constantly watching you. Another thing that we can do is countering isolation. Isolation is used as a tool to reduce the victim's access to supportive relationships. The abuser wants you to rely on only them for your reality. The way you can fix this is the antidote to gaslighting is external validation. Reach out to friends, family members that you were steered away from. You need people who can mirror your reality back to you, countering the reality distortion you've been living in. And guys, I know I've talked a whole lot today. But in summary, emotional abuse creates chronic hyperarousal and a loss of internal autonomy. If you're confused, self-doubting, or feel like you're walking on eggshells, this is not a communication issue. This is not a regular relationship problem, growing pains. This is a power dynamic. And the first thing to do is to recognize what's going on. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll be back with you for another one. Peace.